So in this video, I wanted to give you some background about my personal story, along with my academic training and my professional experiences as both an engineer and educator. And if any of this is of interest to you, feel free to reach out and I'm happy to discuss it, even if it's not necessarily within scope of our course. So I was born in Lorain, Ohio. It's about 30 minutes west of Cleveland. And both Lorain and Cleveland have kind of that traditional Rust Belt feel to them. Particularly, they're very big, at least at the time I was born, in the automotive manufacturing industry, along with steel. And all the men in my family, I believe, all the way back to my my grandparents either worked in steel or automotive. Before that, they were from kind of Appalachia, where they worked in coal mines. So about when I was in late elementary school, I moved to a rural area about 10 minutes west of Lorain. The nearest town to that you may have heard of is Oberlin, Ohio. There's actually a very expensive private liberal arts university close, but where I grew up, it didn't feel anything like that. The thing that my school was most known for was individuals driving their tractors to school. I think there were about 120, 130 people in my graduating class. So needless to say, particularly in 2001, there wasn't much content on the STEM side of things. We didn't have a first robotics team. There were no dedicated STEM classes or anything like that. So I really didn't know what engineering was at the time. But my guidance counselor kind of looked at the strengths that I had in math and science and suggested that electrical engineering would be a good route for me. And my parents were on board with that because that was perceived, even though we didn't understand what it was, as something that could offer some form of employment stability along with a decent salary. So I went to Wright State University for my undergraduate degree, which is a university in Dayton, Ohio. Wright, as you might expect, given that it is in Dayton, is named after the Wright brothers. And my major was electrical engineering. And I actually graduated in 2004. I mean, not like anyone would care, but just in case you're curious, it's not a two-year institution like SAC. However, I did attend Wright State University because it was just the lowest cost option available to me at the time. I finished my undergrad in 2004 and I started graduate school and also began working at Air Force Research Lab, which, as you might expect, at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was about 2 miles right down the road. And I was in the Sensors Directorate, and I was predominantly focused on computational electromagnetics, planar antenna design, and fabrication, test, and measurement. About 3 years later, I decided to transition out of civilian federal employment and actually work as a contractor at a company called Technology Service Corporation, supporting the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane, Indiana. And if you're familiar with the geography of Indiana at all, it's about 30 miles south of Bloomington, Indiana, which is the home of Indiana University. And if you're curious about some of the stuff that I worked on, we worked a lot on a type of antenna known as a leaky wave antenna. The general tough thing in antenna design, for those of you that may be familiar with the general premises, is to make an antenna physically small, but still make it have good directivity and good bandwidth. That's generally a challenging thing. So a leaky wave antenna, basically, rather than have all of the energy radiate out immediately, it's kind of guided along some sort of waveguide, and it gradually leaks out, which increases the effective aperture of the antenna. For any of you that may be kind of familiar with those terms, I know that some of you may have a background in kind of the defense industry, so maybe have some exposure to antennas. We got to work with some really cool people on this particular paper. Leo Kempel is the dean of Michigan State University, where I'd later finished my PhD in electrical engineering. In addition, just some really good experiences there. At TSC, Technology Service Corporation, I worked a lot on the Aegis radar system, particularly the SPS-48E antenna, which was on the destroyer carriers, and just did a lot of different stuff there. So if you're interested at all in radio frequency technology, it's kind of out of scope of all the classes that we teach at SAC, but happy to discuss it with you. So in 2009, I transitioned to higher ed. I started teaching full-time at a community college, and I did that for about 2 years. And that was around the time of, if you remember, the housing crisis and the economic recession, along with kind of ongoing discussions about our federal healthcare system around the time of the Affordable Care Act, at least when it was being discussed and initially passed. So I decided that having an engineering background and always having an interest in business as well, when I was in Bloomington, I got into the rental property business, that I would like to try to kind of contribute my skills to addressing the problems that we have in medicine. So I decided to pursue additional graduate training at Michigan State University. I'll talk about it in a minute, but kind of the gap between there, I actually went back and did an MBA, and I was taking prerequisite courses for medical school at that time, along with studying for the MCAT. and working full time. It was not a great time in my life. And I got dual admission into the medical school at Michigan State, along with the PhD program. And if you're familiar, if you have any interest in maybe going the medical school route, the reason that people do those type of physician scientist program is that they do offer tremendous economic benefits versus just doing medical training alone. Traditionally, you don't pay any tuition and you get a form of a stipend throughout the entire thing. But I looked at the clock, you can probably do the math yourself, and I just started to see that by the time I finished both of those, it was going to be a really, really long road, and I was going to be in my late 30s. So I kind of got interested in just artificial intelligence, which for those of you that know me know that's my primary interest at the moment, along with kind of enabling consumer technologies that could be coupled together in order to impact healthcare at a scale that I couldn't as an actual physician. So I started to focus particularly on sensor analytics. That's just a fancy word to say that you're kind of worried about the entire pipeline of how you can actually develop sensors to gather data to solve a particular problem, and then actually implement artificial intelligence algorithms on that data in order to have an end-to-end solution. And ubiquitous health applications, that's just a fancy way to say that it's some type of technology that's helping your well-being, but you don't even know that it's around you. And I kind of focus, and my main research focus, at least kind of probably up until the last year, was in signal processing and sensor design for eye tracking technology. And I'll tell you why that was in a minute. So I actually moved to Texas originally in order to work on a project for both two projects, one for Facebook and one for Google, in the area of eye tracking, specifically targeted for mixed reality applications. So at the time, if you want to Google it, they were still Facebook, now they're Meta. But they were implementing something known as Project Aria, which is kind of a precursor to developing the eye tracking technology that's actually in the Oculus Quest 3. So after I worked on that project for about a year and a half, just doing research full time, and I did enjoy it, and I still do research now, as I'll mention a little bit later, I decided that I wanted to have kind of a bit more variety in the work that I was doing. I was interested in teaching more and actually getting into research administration. So I transferred to UTSA, where I worked in setting up the Matrix AI Consortium. And I still do occasionally teach at UTSA, and I have a assistant professor of research appointment by courtesy. So I'm still able to advise both graduate and undergraduate students as part of that appointment. In addition, I'm really, really interested in developing pathways to good jobs, particularly for those individuals that kind of are facing systemic factors that make it hard for them to pursue such things. So got interested in that when I was at UTSA. This is an initial grant that I had funded by Google. As many of you know, San Antonio College is the first two-year college to actually have that same Google grant, which we received last year. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But I still am an active researcher. I need to update these screenshots. It probably looks like I'm claiming that work done in 2021 rather is active, but actually I just submitted some this weekend. So if you look at the timestamp on the computer, you can see when this was. So if you think about this paper on the left, the reason that I included it, if you're interested in artificial intelligence, you know that a lot of the advancements moving forward are going to come from individuals kind of targeting problems for which AI could be a good fit, and then going out and actually building those data sets. And that paradigm is known as data-centric artificial intelligence. And this is kind of a contribution that sits in this space. This is the largest set of eye tracking data, longitudinal eye tracking data on kind of a laboratory grade equipment that's available. This was published, Scientific Data is actually a journal within Nature. In addition, here on the right, it turns out that eye movements are very unique to you, which means when they change a little bit, they can be used for health assessment. But in addition, they can actually be used to authenticate you or tell the difference between you and someone else. And they're a very good modality because, first and foremost, you're probably aware that people are often authenticated using characteristics of their iris. So you're already taking images of the eye. So if you can simultaneously extract eye movement, you have another source of information to use in authentication. But in addition, unlike an iris, which can easily be spoofed through like a contact lens or actually making a fake eye, the authenticating someone using their eye movements also provides a vehicle for what is known as kind of spoof-free continuous or liveness detection. So beyond that, if you have any interest, I mentioned that while I was doing my medical school prerequisite coursework, I completed an MBA, and I have worked in a corporate environment as well, kind of hand in hand with the CFO, developing pro forma forecasting financial statements, actually looking at equity valuations of the whole company. So if you're interested in that, or if you're interested at all in kind of efficiency, Six Sigma, project management, I also have a MS in management science. I am really, really interested in kind of tech startups. I'm involved with one right now. So if that's a way that you want to go, I am more than happy to talk with you about that. And as I mentioned, really active in research still. Connected vehicle security, that's a joint project with Dr. Hina Rathore from Texas State University that's funded by the National Science Foundation. Particularly, we are interested there in scalable solutions that are uniquely capable of distinguishing attacks that are meant to mimic faults. So that was one of the papers that we actually submitted this weekend. In addition, all forms of generative AI, but particularly generative AI, in order to develop technologies that can be used to address the kind of impending demographic crisis that we have in both the US along with other developing Western countries. Anything dealing with eye tracking, whether it's building sensors or processing the data for either mixed reality applications or biometric applications or health assessment, very interested in that. And also do publish quite a bit in engineering education, particularly novel high-impact approaches like integrating course-based undergraduate research experiences into projects, along with other kind of transfer-oriented novel programming that we're going to be piloting this summer with UTSA. So I hope that provided you a little bit of background about me. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. I hit the 11-minute mark. I usually like to make that no more than 10 minutes, but I look forward to learning more about you in the initial discussion board assignment of this course.